recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
Seven more amendment votes here in the House, including this one offered by Congressman Moran. It deals with detainees held at the military prison in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, changing the date for when part of the bill applies to detainees held there to 4 years earlier. Politico writes that Acting IRS Commissioner Daniel Werfel is placing 2 officials on administrative leave for violating government ethics rules at a 2010 conference. The story says the staffers received $1,100 in free food and other items at the conference. Tomorrow, we'll have live coverage of a House oversight hearing about the Treasury Department Inspector General's report about the employee training conferences. That'll be on C-SPAN 3 tomorrow morning at 9:30 a.m. Eastern.
On this vote, the yeas are 165, the nays are 261. The amendment is not agreed to. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Garrett, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevail by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Garrett of New Jersey.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of a request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
Amendment votes continue here in the House. This one would prohibit money in the bill from being used by the TSA to conduct a search in an area outside of an airport, such as in cars, buses, trains, or in train stations. President Obama today appointed UN Ambassador Susan Rice to replace Tom Donilon as White House National Security Advisor in a ceremony in the White House Rose Garden. Samantha Power, a former special assistant to the president, will be nominated to replace Rice at the UN. A headline in the Washington Post, National Security Team Shuffle may signal more activist stance at the White House. The story goes on to say that the changes come as Obama struggles for more political momentum in his second term. The elevation of Rice and Power could quickly change the tenor of the administration's foreign policy debate, much of it centered in the White House, where Donilon and his deputies have concentrated policymaking authority. That from the Washington Post. You can see President Obama today making those personnel announcements here on C-SPAN after the House is out.
On this vote, the yeas are 180, the nays are 247. The amendment has not passed. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Ryan, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevail by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Ryan of Ohio.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
This amendment, offered by Representative Ryan of Ohio, would prohibit funds from being used to pay the salary of any Immigration Services employee who approves a visa for a Brazilian. A new member was sworn in today in the House. Representative Jason Smith, a Republican of Missouri, won a special election for the 8th District yesterday. The House has now seated all 435 members. The new breakdown in the House is 234 Republicans to 201 Democrats.
Are 50, the nays are 373, one present. The amendment is not agreed to. The unfinished business is the request for recorded vote on amendment number 1, printed in the congressional record, offered by the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Cassidy, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the ayes prevail by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 1, printed in the congressional record, offered by Mr. Cassidy of Louisiana.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
The House is voting on amendments to the Homeland Security Bill. The amendment that the House is voting on now would prohibit funding from being used to implement the 2012 flood insurance bill. Here's a breakdown of some of the spending in the overall Homeland Security Bill. There's $10 billion in there for Customs and Border Protection, which includes $2 billion to maintain the 34,000 bed spaces in detention facilities. Also in the bill, nearly $10 billion for FEMA. A little less than half of that is for regular agency funding, and the rest is for emergency disaster relief.
On this vote, the yeas are...
Mr. Gingrey of Georgia votes no. Mr. Hall. Mr. Hall votes aye. Yeah, one word. Mr. Whitman. Off aye on no for Mr. Whitman.
On this vote, the yeas are 281, the nays are 146. The amendment is agreed to. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on the amendment offered by the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Meadows, on which further proceedings were postponed, on which the noes prevail by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Meadows of North Carolina.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
This amendment would prohibit money from being spent on ammunition until a report is submitted to Congress. 2 more amendment votes in this series. Senator Frank Lautenberg's funeral was today. He died Monday at the age of 89. Politico writes about part of the service, saying Vice President Joe Biden offered a funny and poignant tribute to his longtime Senate colleague. Speaking toward the end of a long funeral that included speeches from former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and dozens of members of Lautenberg's family, Biden joked, "If there's a definition of redundant, I'm it." Another quote from the vice president in the story, "Look, the fact is that Frank always had to be in the game, and that is what I loved about your father. Too much to be done, too much left unsettled, too many injustices to right, and too many people need help." The vice president told the senator's family that the thing I loved about him, like me, he loved the Senate. We'll have Senator Lautenberg's funeral here on C-SPAN tonight after the House is out. And you can also watch it right now at cspan.org.
On this vote, the yeas are 234, the nays are 192. The amendment is agreed to. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on amendment number 4, printed in the congressional record by the gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Thompson, on which further proceedings were postponed, on which the noes prevail by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 4, printed in the congressional record, offered by Mr. Thompson of Mississippi.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
Congressional Quarterly has a story about the Thompson Amendment that the House is voting on now. The story goes on to say that on the same day that the Homeland Security Inspector General issued a report calling into question the effectiveness of the Transportation Security Administration's behavior recognition program, Representative Thompson, a longtime critic of the initiative, introduced an amendment that would prohibit spending on behavior detection. As of September, the TSA had spent nearly $878 million and created 2,800 full-time positions within the program, but it has yet to create a strategic plan to assess its effectiveness or gauge spending levels, according to the Inspector General's report. The House voting now on the Thompson Amendment. There's one more amendment vote after this one.
On this vote, the yeas are 147, the nays are 279. The amendment is not agreed to. The unfinished business is the request for a recorded vote on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Runyon, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevail by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Runyon of New Jersey.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
The last vote of the day on the second amendment in this series dealing with the 2012 flood insurance program. This amendment would reinstitute money for the program for New Jersey and New York. The House Armed Services Committee has been reviewing amendments to the Defense Programs Bill for 2014 for much of the day. That markup will continue live on C-SPAN 2 after these votes. And tomorrow we'll be live with another House hearing on IRS operations. The Treasury Department's Inspector General released a report yesterday that shows the IRS spent $49 million over 3 years on training programs, which the IG says contains questionable expenses. Our coverage of the House Oversight Committee hearing starts tomorrow morning at 9:30 Eastern.
On this vote, the yeas are 148, the nays are 278. The amendment is not agreed to. The House will be in order. Members will please take your conversations off the floor. The House will be in order. The committee will be in order. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Madam Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Flores of Texas. At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following section. None of the funds made available in this act may be used to enforce Section 526 of the Energy Independence and Security Act of 2007, Public Law 110-140, 42 United States Code 17142.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Chairman, I rise to offer an amendment which addresses another restrictive and misguided federal regulation. Section 526...
The gentleman will suspend. Members and staff are asked to take their conversations off the floor. The gentleman deserves to be heard.
Section 526 of the Energy Independence and Security Act prohibits federal agencies from entering into contracts for the procurement of an alternative fuel unless its life cycle greenhouse gas emissions are less than or equal to emissions from an equivalent conventional fuel produced from conventional petroleum sources. In summary, my amendment would stop the government from enforcing this ban on all federal agencies funded by the Department of Homeland Security Appropriations Bill. The initial purpose of Section 526 was to stifle Defense Department's plans to buy and develop coal-based or coal-to-liquids jet fuels. This restriction was based on the opinion of environmentalists that coal-based jet fuel produces more greenhouse gas emissions than traditional petroleum. We must ensure that our military has adequate fuel resources and can efficiently rely on domestic and more stable sources of fuel. But Section 526's ban on fuel choice now affects all federal agencies, not just the Defense Department. This is why I'm offering this amendment today to the DHS appropriations bills. Federal agencies should not be burdened with wasting their time studying fuel emissions when there is a simple fix, and that fix is to not restrict the federal government fuel choices based on environmental views, unsound policies, or misguided regulations like those in Section 526. With increasing competition for energy and fuel resources and the continued volatility and instability in the Middle East, it is now more important than ever for our country to become more energy secure and to further develop and produce our domestic energy resources. Placing limits on federal agencies' fuel choices is an unacceptable precedent to set in regard to America's energy policy and independence. Madam Chair, Section 526 makes our nation more dependent on Middle East oil. Stopping the impact of Section 526 will help us promote American energy, improve American energy security, improve the American economy, and create more American jobs. Madam Chairman, it is also important to note that this amendment does not prevent and does not restrict the ability of the federal government to purchase any alternative fuels, including biodiesel, ethanol, or other fuels from renewable sources. It places no restrictions whatsoever on that. Let's remember the following facts about Section 526. It increases our reliance on Middle Eastern oil. It hurts our military readiness, our national security, and our energy security. It prevents the increased use of safe, clean, and efficient North American oil and gas. It increases the cost of American food and energy. It hurts American jobs and the American economy. And last but certainly not least, it costs our taxpayers more of their hard-earned dollars. I offered this amendment to the appropriations bills during the 112th Congress, and they all passed on the floor of the House with strong bipartisan support. My friend Mr. Conaway also added similar language to the Defense Authorization Bill today to exempt the Defense Department from this burdensome regulation. I urge my colleagues to support passage of this common sense amendment. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Chairman, we accept the gentleman's amendment. Yield back.
For what purpose, the gentleman from North Carolina?
Madam Chairman, I move to strike the last words.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Chairman, I rise in opposition to the gentleman's amendment. Section 526 of the Energy Independence and Security Act of 2007 is intended to ensure that the environmental costs from the use of alternative fuels are at least no worse than the fuels in use today. It requires the federal government do no more harm when it comes to harmful emissions and climate change than it does today through the use of unconventional fuels. Section 526 precludes the use of fuels such as coal to liquids, as well as unconventional petroleum fuels such as tar sands and oil shale, unless advanced technologies such as carbon sequestration are used to mitigate their greenhouse gas emissions. This is a provision in law that I think affords important environmental protections, important conditions on the adoption of alternative fuels. So I think it's a mistake. Would be a mistake for this body to prohibit in any way the enforcement of Section 526, and therefore I oppose the amendment and ask colleagues to do likewise, and yield back my time.
The gentleman from North Carolina yields back. The gentleman from, for what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Move to strike the last word, Madam Chairman.
The gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Chairman, I rise in strong support of the Flores amendment to H.R. 2217 that will prevent funds in this legislation from being used to carry out Section 526 of the Energy Independence and Security Act of 27. Section 526 prohibits all federal agencies from contracting for alternative fuels that emit higher levels of greenhouse gas emissions than conventional petroleum sources. This means that if a federal agency, particularly the Department of Defense and Homeland Security, has the ability of utilizing an alternative fuel that even has 1 scintilla more of carbon emissions than conventional fuels, it cannot be used. Some of you may not know what a scintilla is, but the professor from Duke does. It's a very, very, very small amount. As a result, Section 526 severely limits innovation from Homeland Security at Customs and Border Patrol to improve clean carbon capture technologies for alternative fuels, thereby increasing our dependence on foreign oil and will only further increase fuel costs. The amendment intends to remove the handcuffs placed on the agencies under this bill by Section 526. This means that Homeland Security, the Department of Defense, particularly the Air Force, will still be able to purchase Canadian fuels with just traces, scintillas of oil sands that may create more of a carbon footprint than completely conventional fuel. Madam Chairman, I support a full repeal of Section 526 because the cost of refined product for DOD has increased by over 500%. 500% in the last 10 years when volume only increased 30%. This amendment, the Flores amendment, takes a very important step of achieving this goal by prohibiting funding to carry out Section 526 for this upcoming fiscal year at Homeland Security. With that in mind, I appreciate the opportunity to work with my colleague from Texas, Mr. Flores, on this important issue. I urge this body to support this amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Georgia yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. Speaks recognition.
Madam Chairman. Madam Chairman.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New Mexico seek recognition?
Madam Chair, I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Chairman, I rise to engage Chairman Carter in a colloquy on the Science and Tech Directorate within the Department of Homeland Security. Mr. Chairman, as you know, the Enabling Act that created the Homeland Security Department provided the new department with special access to the Department of Energy's national laboratories. The intent was for DHS to utilize the unique capabilities at the national laboratory so that DHS would not build up duplicative capabilities within the department. Building duplicative capabilities at a different agency is poor use of taxpayer dollars, and there is no need to do so given the department's access to the existing national labs. At a time when our government has dramatically reduced its ability to conduct cutting-edge research into new technologies, we must ensure that the Department of Homeland Security is using its resources in the most cost-effective methods possible. Instead of reinventing the wheel and developing new capabilities, the DHS should be utilizing our DOE national labs whenever practical as they conduct research, development, testing, or evaluate activities. The national labs have first-rate capabilities in many areas relevant to Homeland Security, ranging from explosive detection technologies to advanced cybersecurity techniques. Mr. Chairman, I urge us to work with the Department to ensure that their research and development funds are effectively spent and not used to create redundant capabilities. And I would yield to Chairman Carter.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. I appreciate the gentleman from New Mexico raising this issue. As he has pointed out, the Department has the ability to utilize the incredible scientific resources of our national laboratories, and I look forward to working with him on this important issue. As our nation continues to face a tight fiscal situation, it is vital that the DHS work to ensure that its scientific and tech directorate make good use of our government's existing capabilities.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I thank the Chairman and the Ranking Member for their work on this, and with that I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from New Mexico yields back the balance of his time. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Madam Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Meehan of Pennsylvania. At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following section. None of the funds made available in this act may be used for U.S. Customs and Border Protection pre-clearance operations at Abu Dhabi International Airport in the United Arab Emirates. The limitation described in this section shall not apply in the case of the administration of a tax or tariff.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Madam Chairman. I rise today in support of the Meehan, DeFazio, and Miller amendment. This amendment deals with the Department of Homeland Security, which has entered into an agreement to establish a Customs and Border Protection facility, which is a pre-clearance facility at the Abu Dhabi International Airport in the United Arab Emirates. Now, there are currently other pre-clearance facilities in some countries around the world, and the purpose behind these is really to facilitate the travel for many who go through this at a facility away from the United States. We have huge backlogs at some of our critical airports, particularly places like New York. Now, however, the ranking member on the Homeland Security Committee that I serve on, a subcommittee along with the other members and some 150 members of Congress have joined me in a letter because we're concerned about the intent of what is done with this. The effect of it is really going to be to dramatically disadvantage American airlines. You see, what's happening in Abu Dhabi is there is no American airline that flies from Abu Dhabi to the United States. This is solely being done for the benefit of an airline which is solely supported by the United Arab Emirates. And it's going to have a disparate impact on the ability for our American airlines to be competitive for the very simple reason that what will happen is many people will say, well, I'm going to get to New York and I've got a 3 or 4 hour wait in order to get through that line. I'm going to go to Abu Dhabi, and I'm going to fly through there on the foreign carrier, all the jobs associated with our American airlines begin to be influenced by supporting a foreign-based airline that will then increase their market share in here into the United States. Now, it also, what it does is it starts to shift some of the favor of the placement of these facilities towards third world, towards third parties, countries that will enter an agreement like is happening in Abu Dhabi, where they're underwriting 80% of the cost. And I don't want to see our Customs and Border Patrol to be for sale to the highest bidder. And that seems to be what one of the concerns is here. The reality is as well that the extent to which we think we are having an impact on terrorism, anybody's going to know, don't go through Abu Dhabi. Go through any of the other places that will still get you into the country without a pre-clearance that would be a check on a foreign area. And the last thing is, this is going to be partially funded with the United States taxpayer dollars. 20% of the cost is going to be associated with us. So why would American taxpayers be paying money to support what will actually be to the benefit of a foreign-based airlines? So along with 150 of our other colleagues, I hope that our amendment will ensure that taxpayer dollars do not go to subsidize the pre-clearance facility and the foreign government-owned airlines, and I urge members of both parties to support it, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania yields back. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Chairman, I rise in support of this amendment. I think it's a good amendment, and I have the same concerns that are expressed by the author. I'm glad to yield time to my colleague if he wishes to speak.
Madam Chairman, I rise in opposition to the amendment.
The gentleman from North Carolina is recognized.
I will claim the time in opposition, Madam Chairman.
Okay.
The Customs and Border.
back.
Yeah, thank you. I thank the Chairman. The Customs and Border Protection Pre-Clearance Program, Madam Chairman, serves a critical national security function by stationing CBP officers abroad at the cost of the host nation. This allows CBP officers to screen and make admissibility decisions on individuals, goods, and baggage long before they ever leave a foreign port or could possibly become a threat to the homeland. I myself have been screened as a part of pre-clearance operations in Canada and Ireland. Found these operations not only a convenience for travelers, but also an effective and efficient way of carrying out security operations. In fiscal 2012 alone, CBP officers and agricultural specialists pre-cleared more than 1.5 million travelers destined for the United States. To outright prohibit the expansion of this program to an area of the world where we know terrorists are actively traveling and training and seeking to carry out missions of harm against the homeland simply makes no sense whatsoever. Now, I understand many domestic airlines have expressed concern that this deal would somehow give UAE-based airlines an upper hand. But there's some facts that aren't disputed and we simply must consider or should consider. For one, CBP has stated numerous times that access to Abu Dhabi for American carriers would be a precondition of implementing pre-clearance there. Secondly, our bill provides statutory language that prohibits pre-clearance operations at new locations until 3 conditions are met. The foreign and national security rationales have been provided to the Congress, a full cost analysis has been provided to the Congress, and an economic impact analysis of any new location on U.S. airline carriers has been, the impact on the U.S. carriers has been conducted. That analysis has been conducted and provided to the Congress. That's good language. That will be good oversight on our part, and I commend the Chairman for including that language in our bill. So given this language, given the known benefits for traveler convenience, for this country's security, the known benefits that this program provides, I simply can't support the gentleman's agreement, and I urge its rejection. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Pennsylvania. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Mexico seek recognition?
I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment offered
amendment
by Mr. Ben Ray Lujan of New Mexico. At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following section: for Department of Homeland Security, Federal Emergency Management Agency, state and local programs, for the State Homeland Security Grant Program under Section 2004 of the Homeland Security Act of 2002, 6 U.S.C. 605, as authorized by subsection F2 of such section, there is hereby appropriated in the amount otherwise provided by this Act for Department of Homeland Security, Office of the Chief Financial Officer is hereby reduced by $10 million.
The gentleman from New Mexico is recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Chairman, in what has been one of the worst drought years in the recorded history of my home state of New Mexico, we are already feeling the effects of another severe fire season. Already more than 18,000 acres of forest have burned as a result of 2 fires caused by a downed power line, and those numbers are growing as we speak. Hundreds of homes have been threatened and families have been evacuated. In 2011, during the Las Conchas fire, we lost 150,000 acres of forest to wildfire, again caused by a downed power line. The importance of disaster preparedness is key to saving human lives and property. My amendment today would make available an additional $10 million for state and local grant programs to ensure local towns and communities can be prepared for catastrophic wildfires before they hit. This amendment is cost neutral, and while there may be concerns by some of my colleagues and even opposition, I would ask, Madam Chair, that we work together to understand that when there's communities burning, that we reach out and we try to do what we can to help these innocent individuals. My amendment would also allow local utilities to take preventative measures for the causes and impacts of wildfires. We must do all we can to ensure that communities have the resources they need to address the dangers and damages of wildfire before and after catastrophic events occur. I urge my colleagues to support my amendment. And Madam Chair, before I yield back, I would like to take a moment to thank all the firefighters for their brave service battling the Tres Lagunas fire and the Thompson Ridge fires in northern New Mexico. Time and again, those on the front line, as well as those on the command teams, have acted admirably, putting their lives at risk. And to all those who have volunteered, donated resources, and lent a helping hand to the firefighters and our displaced friends and neighbors, God bless you and thank you for your hard work. Again, Madam Chair, I urge my colleagues to consider supporting my amendment that will help our communities prepare for wildfires. And with that, Madam Chair, I thank the Chairman and the Ranking Member for their work in this important area, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman may not reserve. The
I yield
gentleman
back the
yields
balance
back.
of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Madam Chairman, I rise in opposition to this amendment.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam. In total, this bill provides $2.5 billion for Homeland Security first responder grants. This is $400 million above the President's request for fiscal year 2014 and $35 million above the fiscal year 2013. This bill prioritizes funding. The consolidation in this bill forces the Secretary to examine the intelligence and risk and put scarce dollars where they are needed most, whether it is a port, rail, surveillance, or access and hardened projects, or whether it is to high-risk urban areas or to states, as opposed to reverse engineering projects to fill the amount designated for one of many programs. I strongly urge my colleagues to support fiscal discipline and vote no on this amendment. Yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
I move to strike the last words.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Chairman, I have no objection to this amendment. In fact, want to commend the gentleman for offering it. he's in a tight spot with this, with limited possibilities for offsetting the addition. He wants to apply to the situation in his area that he describes, and the offset is not ideal. But I'm certainly willing to work with him going forward to get more money directed to these vital emergency needs. And I yield back.
The gentleman from North Carolina yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New Mexico. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to.
Madam Chairman, on this I'd like a recorded vote, please.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New Mexico will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition?
Madam Chairwoman, I move to strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Chairwoman, I rise today to engage in a colloquy with the subcommittee chairman, Congressman Carter, regarding Operation Stone Garden, which is a facet of our Homeland Security operations and which is provided for in the Department of Homeland Security Appropriations Act for the fiscal year 2014. By way of background, Operation Stone Garden is a Department of Homeland Security grant program that is intended to provide a great deal of cooperation and coordination among federal, state, local, municipal, and tribal law enforcement agencies in a joint mission to secure the United States borders, including travel corridors and states that border Canada and Mexico, as well as states and territories with international water borders. The grants are made available to local units of government. They are made based on risk analysis and feasibility of the proposed investments demonstrated by the applicants. I speak on behalf of the local law enforcement entities in Arizona when I say that this program actually works. It serves to bolster resources available to law enforcement in border states as they do their best to tackle overwhelming problems of illegal immigration in addition to illegal trafficking of drugs, persons, weapons, and money. I hear nothing but praise for the program, and I know that the people of Arizona and other border states reap the benefits of this program, whether they know the program by name or not. When people are involved in the process, you see certain programs and initiatives take off because everyone's input is respected, considered, and valued. In fact, the program works so well and is needed so badly that in 2009, Secretary Napolitano decided to extend an additional $30 million to be divided amongst the states which needed the resources most. Though I may not agree with Arizona's former governor on many issues, this is a decision I applauded. The problem of illegal immigration is one that I think will remain for some time, which is why we are debating immigration reform in Congress today. As I have said before, trust is a series of promises kept. Current and previous administrations, held by both parties, have failed to keep that promise, and so we are here today. Border security and interior enforcement are of utmost concern when considering immigration and the protection of our homeland. And this program is a prime example of the teamwork that is needed to deliver on the promises made to the people of this great republic. This investment in our nation's homeland security is one that pays off over and over again, and it's my hope that future legislation will continue to provide robust resources for this program. It is our collective duty as a deliberative body to ensure that we both support the federal programs and initiatives that actually work while simultaneously reducing or sunsetting those that do not. I am pleased that both houses have been pleased that the House has begun such a process in the past two Congresses, and I am proud to be part of that. The people of Arizona and I thank the Chairman for increasing the resources available to Operation Stone Garden relative to previous appropriations. And with that, I yield back to the Chairman of Homeland Security Committee.
I thank my friend for highlighting this important program. As a fellow border state member, I am especially aware of the issues we face with illegal immigration and criminal trafficking across our borders, particularly our southern border. Operation Stone Garden provides valuable resources to local and tribal governments for coordination with their federal counterparts and to assist them in furthering our nation's border security. I look forward to working with my friend from Arizona and others as we move forward to ensure continued support for this worthy and valuable program. And I yield back to the gentleman from Arizona.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I reserve the balance of my time.
No,
The
yield
gentleman
back.
may
I'm
not
sorry, yield
reserve.
back.
The
Yield
gentleman
back my
yields
time.
back. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Madam Chair, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Engel of New York. At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following section. None of the funds made available by this act may be used by the Department